I didn't totally share with my family how bad I was, especially the children. I tried to protect them.
My mom was feeling like she was on a downward spiral. There were definitely moments of panic.
One day I tried to walk with my husband. I couldn't make it 100 feet.
I think what we expected, that she was going to be in a wheelchair and I was going to be the person pushing the wheelchair.
It was more than just a simple fatigue. She was totally exhausted and could not do very much.
As far as the medical model is concerned, it's a sentence to disability. It's a one-way trip down.
Anne's condition grew progressively worse. She was overcome by overwhelming fatigue. Her body was starting to shut down. To accurately diagnose Anne's illness, more testing was necessary.
I went to a neurologist, and he had a complete MRI done. And though there were lesions, the diagnosis came back disc problems, bulging disc. He didn't believe the bulging disc diagnosis and ordered a spinal tap, which is a fairly dangerous procedure.
The spinal tap was done to look at the protein in the cerebrospinal fluid.
The spinal fluid was sent off to the laboratory for analysis. A week later, Anne, who was still struggling to walk, summoned the courage to phone her neurologist and find out the results of her spinal tap.
I called him to get the diagnosis, and he said the words multiple sclerosis, and I started crying.
With Anne clearly distraught, the neurologist suggested that the diagnosis ought to be confirmed.
He said to me, "You may want to get a second opinion." And that got him off the hook with my tears.
And then, of course, that second opinion became the Mayo Clinic.
A specialist at the Mayo Clinic ran a series of MRIs. The presence of numerous lesions along her spinal cord left no doubt about Anne's fate.
He didn't equivocate at all. He said, "You have MS." And I broke out in tears, of course. It was just devastating.
I guess I was kind of scared too. Even though I wasn't the person with MS, it was a very scary proposition to me too.
I had read enough about MS to know that I was headed to a very, very dark place.
Usually the people that you identify with multiple sclerosis they're walking with a cane or a walker or then a wheelchair, and pretty soon it just gets progressively worse and worse.
The doctor didn't say too much. He actually, bless his heart, tears came to his eyes. He was a kind man. And his parting words were, "Take care of yourself."
The journey home began in stunned silence as the couple realized that the medical establishment was offering Anne no hope.
The doctor essentially told me that there was nothing more he could do for me. There was nothing he could offer me, which was a favor to me by not offering me false hope.
I think she went from feeling sorry for herself and being defeated and all that to saying, "No, I'm not going to give up. This disease is not going to beat me. I know there's a way out, and I'm going to see what I can do to find it."
After the shock, I knew I had to do something. I just couldn't passively accept this fate. Having a name gave me motivation, and in a sense it gave me power. I knew the name of my enemy.
She was to the point where she says, "I'm not going to let this get me down. I know there's got to be an answer, or there's some way that we can beat this disease."
Anne gave me the impression that if anyone was going to overcome a diagnosis of multiple sclerosis, that she would be the one to do it.
Determined to fight her illness, Anne scoured libraries for everything she could read on multiple sclerosis.
Most of the books about MS are depressing. They're black.
Amid the dire volumes, Anne found a book that gave her hope.
I found a book by a British journalist named Judy Graham, who had MS, entitled Multiple Sclerosis, a self-help guide to its management.
In the book, Judy Graham suggested there might be a link between MS and diet.
The Judy Graham book just grabbed me, it grabbed my imagination, and somehow I knew diet was going to work.
Anne read of largely ignored research by a physician, Roy Swank, which showed MS could be controlled through diet.
Dr. Roy Swank advocated eating less than 15 grams of saturated fat a day and basically giving up red meat at least for a year. I took it one step forward, and I don't know why, but I decided to cut dairy out entirely.
After only a few weeks on her new diet, Anne experienced significant improvements in her health.
Just cutting out the saturated fat and dairy, the disease process seemed to stop. I wasn't going any further, and I felt hope.
Anne felt she'd unlocked part of the puzzle, but her readings made her wonder if food allergies might be a component of MS.
She said, do you think on the internet we could find some articles or some information about the connection between allergy and multiple sclerosis?
After a long search, Steve Sawyer found a vital article by a scientist named Ashton Embry.
Ashton is a father of 3 boys, and when his eldest got diagnosed with MS, Ashton was totally disgusted that medicine had not anything truly to offer.
Reading Embry's article, Anne learned how certain trigger foods can bring on MS symptoms.
The next day, I stopped eating the 5 main trigger foods: wheat, I already stopped dairy, legumes, eggs, and yeast.
The MS diet is really very countercultural. You know, if you think that you can't eat eggs and you can't eat milk and you can't eat wheat and you can't eat legumes, then really in this culture you say, well, what can I eat?
Anne developed a diet around poultry, fish, a multitude of fresh vegetables, and non-gluten grains such as rice, none of which triggered her MS symptoms, and she started getting better.
She would get excited after the fact, after she started to notice things worked. And then you'd start to see her getting just a little bit more optimistic and a bit more energetic.
I was starting to come alive again.
As Anne's body responded to the diet, she progressively added physical exercise to her routine.
Anne really became a different person from the standpoint of her physical activity.
And as she grew stronger, Anne knew her story needed to be shared.
There's a beautiful legacy in the MS community of those people who advocate the diet. Is anybody who gets better tries to share it. And so outside of conventional medicine, the diet has been being spread and refined and passed on to other people. Just because you want to share the good news, you reclaim your life, you've got a whole new life back, and you want to tell other people about it.
So many people were inspired by Anne's recovery that she put together a copy shop booklet explaining the diet she devised.
Even while I was recovering, I had people calling me and asking me, because my recovery was so remarkable, how do you do it? And it seems like everybody knows somebody with MS. And so I was giving information out.
Anne kept refining her diet and worked at getting the word out. Her strength kept growing, and amazingly, the woman who could once hardly walk was now taking on long and strenuous hikes.
The triumph was in October of 2000 when I hiked down the Grand Canyon with a friend of mine to Inspiration Point, which is 6 miles down, 6 miles back, 3,000 feet elevation change, in one day, and I was absolutely triumphant. My MS journey was so much more than just recovering physically. It was a total growing experience, and strange as it sounds, MS was an incredible gift to me.